Well, hello there. It is 3:06 here on News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Great to be back with you. Great to have these guests with us today. Tiffany Polifko is going to join us coming up this hour, 3:30. She's a Loudoun County School Board member. We'll talk about what is going on at all of these Virginia counties who have decided to start an open insurrection against the voters of Virginia, who chose a governor who said no more gender nonsense in the schools. These schools would like to continue that. They don't care what the voters say. That's what we call an insurrection. Jerry Dunleavy is going to be here at 4 o'clock. James Hassan going to be here at 4 o'clock. These two journalists have written a great book on the disaster of the Afghanistan withdrawal under Joe Biden. We'll chat with them in studio. And Margot Cleveland here at 5 o'clock from the Federalist as we get into the latest details in the Biden family crime saga. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Always appreciate your contributions to the program. First and foremost, my thanks to our guest hosts over the course of the last week while I was on vacation, who filled in here, Derek Hunter, Dan Mandis, Chris Stegall, Michael Pelka. My thanks to all of you for holding down the fort here. I just got back from Florida. I got back from Florida, the free state of Florida, because I took the family, took my 9-year-old down to Universal Studios. You were wondering, where was Vince? He was at Universal Studios. And I didn't know what to expect. I had been to Universal Studios many years ago when I lived in Florida as a much younger man. But now we went this week, and I gotta say, I loved it. We did not go to Disney intentionally. We decided instead of going to Universal, and I'm sure there's all sorts of reasons why Universal is problematic too. It's NBC Universal after all. But we went to Universal. We really enjoyed it, and it was funny because when I got there to get to the airport in Orlando, and you get out and you call the Uber because that was the cheapest way for us to get from airport to hotel, and where are you headed? Universal. Actually, they don't ask anymore because it's on the phone, but he knows he's taking us to Universal, and he looks back and he says, Universal, huh? Yep. Nobody's really going to Disney anymore, says the driver. And I said, really? Everyone's going to Universal? Yeah, everyone's going to Universal. I'm like, well, that doesn't surprise me, I said. And at that moment, both of us, I think we recognized that we were on the same wavelength politically. I don't know what the chances of that are, but it seems pretty good in Florida. I'm going to find somebody who shares my sentiments. And he goes, yep, Disney should have never gone woke, said the driver. The driver, he just took a shot. I didn't give him any other indication. I just said, yeah, basically, serves him right. That makes sense to me. And he said, yep, Disney should have never gone woke. And we were fast friends. We spent the rest of the car ride talking about how crappy Disney is. And then he told me about all the rides. You know how, like, you live in a place like Washington, D.C., and you don't do the tourist things? You know, people come, the only time you go is when people from out of town come to visit. They're like, I haven't been to Washington, D.C. before. All right, come on down. We're going to do a lot of walking at the National Mall. No, he said he's a local there in Orlando. He rides all the rides. He had excellent breakdowns of every ride and show and what I should see and what I should skip and what's a little jerky and what's smooth. I was for it. So he was perfect for that. And the cool thing about this park, my kid, as I said, is 9 years old. She's obsessed with Harry Potter. That's her thing right now. So, of course, one of the reasons you go to Universal is to check out their Harry Potter world between the two parks they have, Universal Studios and Islands of Adventure. Boy, that is immersive. That is unbelievable. You should have seen, if you've ever done it, you will have seen this expression. The expression on my kid's face, she couldn't believe that she had stepped foot into the books. She's looking around going, what is happening? She was in complete awe, and that made the whole thing totally worth it. And thank goodness, because it's expensive. It is not a cheap vacation to go to one of these theme parks. It's like, imagine buying a meal at a ballpark, right? You go to like a Major League Baseball park, and then every meal you buy is priced like that for the entire time you're there. So we made sure to order some groceries first. It was DoorDash or one of the apps. We said, get some bananas to the room. We're going to have a simple, cheap breakfast before we head out in the morning. And then you get in there, and the rides are unbelievable, man. They're totally immersive. The 3D glasses, it's hot down there, but tons of air conditioning. That's fantastic when you're standing in line. And then I'll spare you any more discussion of Universal, but I have to say, I was so amazed by a stunt show they had. They have, you ever seen the Bourne Identity? All the Bourne movies, the Jason Bourne movies, they're really awesome. A little too quick, like fast-paced. The camera angles and shots for me, that kind of make you want to throw up, actually, watching this. But Matt Damon, as a guy who kicks everybody's butt. He's on the run. The government's trying to chase him down. They have a stunt show dedicated to this guy and to the character, Jason Bourne. And what they do is on like a big IMAX screen, they will actually set a scene. They'll have like a desert, like you're dropped into the middle of Afghanistan or wherever. And as the screen moves, the guy kind of like walks in place on stage, but he looks like he's literally moving through this scene. And then they'll have giant set pieces, remote controlled, that drive on to the stage along the screen. It is so perfectly synced up. It has to be robotic. It has to be completely automated. It is so perfectly synced up, you don't even realize a 3D set piece is moving into the set. So all of a sudden, he's climbing a tower, which I thought was a video a moment ago. He's climbing up a tower. He's leaping. They're firing guns at each other. Everything's exploding. Honestly, I'm not. It takes a lot to surprise me with this kind of technology these days because I've seen. I feel like I've seen it all. That was new. I couldn't believe how well. And apparently they do it like 3 or 4 times a day, 365 days a year. So they've got it. It's a well-oiled machine, but very impressive. Anyway, so that's what I spent my week doing in very hot Florida. It was even hotter than here, as you would imagine. Heat index up into the low 100s. But really enjoyed it. Enjoyed the time off. Great to be back with you today. And so as I'm going through everything, I'm taking an inventory of all the stuff that I missed while I was gone. And I realized that really it all started with, I would say the first big story is it all started with that country singer who has become, was he #1 on the Billboard today? #1. He's up there. He's one of the most played songs in America, Rich Men North of Richmond. And, we actually started our trip in Georgia. We went and saw some family friends. And we were all sitting around watching the video together. And I was amazed by this. I'm sure you've heard a lot of people talk about this by now. I'll just add my voice to this. I think the most amazing thing about it is not that the song is good. The song is good. And not that it's resonant in terms of its lyrics. It definitely is. It's the passion this guy shows. It's the passion. Guy with big ZZ Top beard, singing at full intensity. You know how you have the capacity to sing at a much higher volume than you probably do? You ever go to, maybe in church, that's typically where most people sing on a weekly basis. You don't sing at the top of your lungs. You don't, maybe you do. And more power to you if you do. You don't sing at the top of your lungs. You're kind of constrained, right? You're a little more disciplined. You know what your abilities are when it comes to your singing. So typically you don't go the distance. You're not belting at church. You're not Celine Dion. You're just going to, deliver the music as you know it without embarrassing yourself. He went for it. He went to the limit, right? You listen to that and you think, that's amazing. It was totally amazing. It was passionate, emotional, and it tapped into this sentiment that people have across the country that things are not serving our interests. They're not. That the people in charge are not taking care of us to the extent that they're supposed to have any role in that at all. But in terms of the basics, right? What the kind of basic services that you expect from our government. No, they're subverting all of that. Our justice system, what is happening right now? Go ahead, tell me with a straight face. You can say it, I'll hear you. Do you trust our justice system as it's currently composed right now? You don't? What a shock. How did that happen? Oh, the constant abuse of either you or people you know or candidates you like or public officials you support, not for the purposes of bringing about justice, but instead for the purposes of bringing about political ends. Here's a big story. Well, here's a huge story that developed over the course of the last week and a half, which is we got more and more information on how the Justice Department was rigging the deck for the Biden family. They were rigging the whole game and making it so that Hunter Biden could get away with literally anything. Over the weekend, 2 massive reports, and we're going to get to more of this with Margot Cleveland coming up at 5 o'clock. Over the weekend, 2 massive reports one from the New York Times, one from Politico, detailing how David Weiss, the U.S. attorney in Delaware, was prepared to drop every single charge against Hunter. No charges whatsoever. He wouldn't even have to plead guilty to anything. He'd get away with everything, from failing to pay millions of dollars in taxes, to lobbying on behalf of foreign entities, to lying on a gun background check form about his drug usage, a felony. He'd get away with all of it. They were going to subject him to nothing. They would give him, a Swedish massage, little skin treatment, something to really, fluff him up a little bit. That was the plan. But the only reason it fell apart, that plan didn't come to fruition, and yet something very close to it almost did. The only reason that plan didn't come to fruition is because the IRS whistleblowers appeared. As soon as those IRS whistleblowers went public, Gary Shapley, the other gentleman, his name escapes me at the moment, these guys come out and they start laying out, and they're the top investigators on the Hunter Biden case. They're the top people at the IRS to investigate this. They come out and they say that the Biden administration has been interfering throughout all of this. I've never seen an investigation like this. In all of my years investigating taxes and tax crimes, I've never seen anything like this, they say. This is exceptional. And every time our investigation began to yield information about the big guy, Dad, Joe Biden, there were people getting in our way telling us we weren't allowed to ask questions on that subject. Is it Joseph Ziegler, by the way? Is that the other name? Good. That just came to mind. And so they were being stymied throughout. And then when they were actually given permission to pursue an investigative route, the Biden family was being tipped off that something was coming, that investigators were going to come speak to them and their associates. They were told in advance. We got to tell the Secret Service. They were told in advance. They were tipped off. When there was an effort to search a storage unit that contained a bunch of the evidence, apparently, of Biden family crimes, they were alerted in advance. The investigation was constantly being corrupted by forces within the government, obviously protecting Biden. And so we get these reports today, over the weekend, that give us more information about what the New York Times refers to as preferential treatment. Quote, preferential treatment, end quote, for Hunter Biden. David Weiss was prepared to drop every last charge against him until those IRS whistleblowers appeared. Here's the quote from the Times. Earlier this year, the Times found Mr. Weiss appeared willing to forego any prosecution of Mr. Biden at all, and his office came close to agreeing to end the investigation without requiring a guilty plea on any charges. But the correspondence reveals, that is, the correspondence obtained by the New York Times from Hunter Biden's attorneys, that his position relayed through his staff, that is David Weiss, changed in the spring, around the time a pair of IRS officials on the case accused the Justice Department of hamstringing the investigation. Mr. Weiss suddenly demanded that Mr. Biden plead guilty to committing tax offenses. Now, let me pause on that concept for a moment. That plea deal that was just about to go through the court until that excellent judge just asked a couple of basic questions, that still was a slap on the wrist. That was a sweetheart deal. What we're finding out now is that David Weiss had an even sweeter deal prepared for Hunter if it wasn't for those pesky IRS whistleblowers blowing it up. So the sweetheart deal was what they tried to put into motion after the IRS whistleblowers came out. And the sweetheart deal said this: you're going to be pleading guilty to the taxes, and it's not going to follow you. It's not a big deal. You've already paid the back taxes. There's not going to be any meaningful consequences for you. Just keep your nose clean, right? The other is the gun charge. It'll go away. We'll have a deferred prosecution here. It'll be nothing. It'll be nothing because, you're going to be able to get away with it. That was the arrangement. Additionally, and most importantly, Hunter Biden was given blanket immunity in this plea arrangement for anything involving anything that he has done overseas that enriched his family. That was all laid out in these documents put before the court. And so the judge was like, wait a second, what's going on here? And started asking some questions. And that yielded an interesting dynamic in the room because all of a sudden Hunter Biden's attorneys are saying, yeah, blanket immunity is the only way we're moving forward. And then the attorneys representing David Weiss said, no, that's not right. The investigation's ongoing. He could be charged for Foreign Agent Registration Act violations. And then that's where the standoff ensued, and the judge said, okay, you guys need to get your ducks in a row. Not today. This is not happening. And so Hunter Biden pleads not guilty. Why did that drama play out in that courtroom, though? Why did the two sides not have their stories straight? They had spent years negotiating this. How is that possible? Well, I think some of the reporting we saw this weekend gives us an indication of exactly why that happened. More in a moment. It's 3:22 now. Pair of reports this weekend, New York Times and Politico, on what happened with that plea deal. And, you've got to read between the lines a little bit here. Obviously, there are interests. Hunter Biden's lawyers are the ones who apparently are sharing a lot of this intel in the hopes of making it so that Hunter wins his court battles as they go forward. But the only reason that Hunter is being given a second look, that they're not just getting away with a blanket sweetheart deal, is these IRS whistleblowers decided to speak up and said, hey, there's something super corrupt going on here. And now there's a cleanup act underway. And in that courtroom, the reason it fell apart between the two sides, the Justice Department and the Hunter team, because you would think, man, they would have choreographed this all the way through, is because the woman who negotiated the deal to give Hunter everything, no responsibility, no accountability, was the same woman who the IRS whistleblowers said was corrupting the investigation. Leslie Wolf, the assistant U.S. attorney in Delaware, she wasn't in that courtroom. Interestingly, she was kind of taken off the case around the time the IRS whistleblower started speaking up. So the new guy was sitting in that courtroom from the U.S. Attorney's Office. His name's Leo Wise, Leo Wise, and he didn't know what he was looking at. He didn't even know how generous this deal was supposed to be. And then it fell apart. All right, more with Margot Cleveland on that coming up. Tiffany Polifko joins us from Loudoun County, just moments away as we talk about the insurrection some Virginia school systems have against the voters. Well, good afternoon to you. It is 3:36 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up today at 4 o'clock, the journalists Jerry Dunleavy and James Hassan with a new book on the Biden fiasco involving the withdrawal from Afghanistan. They've got the details ahead. Margot Cleveland is with us at 5 o'clock from the Federalist. We'll chat about what is going on with the Biden crime family, all the new developments in that subject. Margot always follows those details really closely. We'll chat with her at 5, and we'll talk to you at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Something else going on right now in Virginia. You had the people of Virginia decided that they were tired of the direction of the school system across the Commonwealth. And that was the key reason why Governor Gov Youngkin and company came into office, right? Because when you get people like Terry McAuliffe saying that parents shouldn't have a say in their kids and their education, yeah, the option is obvious, right? You go with the other guy, the guy who says, yeah, parents should be involved. And that's not a partisan point. That's a completely, it should be a bipartisan point. It should be not related to politics at all, other than this guy needs to be governor in order to safeguard this obvious thing. So Youngkin comes into office, and he also addresses one of the key points that's part of this conversation, which is you can't have the schools transing children. They should not be in the gender meddling business. In fact, parents should know everything that's happening in those schools. Everything. Again, an obvious point, and it's sad it has to be said. And so recently, the Youngkin administration released new guidance that says to the school systems how they handle issues around gender confusion, and that you can only use facilities and play on sports teams that are associated with your actual sex. That's it. Now several school districts are in open revolt. There's an open insurrection going on from left-wing school districts in the Commonwealth. For more on this, I want to bring in Tiffany Polifko now. She's a Loudoun County School Board member, and she joins us on the phone. Tiffany, great to have you with us.
Hi, Vince. Thank you so much for having me on this afternoon.
So I know I've seen declarations from Arlington, Fairfax, Prince William, that they're flipping the parents of Virginia the bird. They're going to go with whatever they want to do with this gender policy. What is happening in Loudoun County?
Well, so currently we are in a situation where we have decided that these model policies are going to go through our subcommittees just like any other policy does. So we're going to put that through our, it'll go through our student services subcommittee. We'll reach out, get community feedback, bring that back to the table. It'll come forward to the entire board as an information item and then for action. So it's going to take us a little while before we actually get to the meat on the bones.
Right. And so that's why I'm seeing a bunch of headlines that says Loudoun County's undecided. But what I thought was going on here is that when the governor's administration releases model policies, by law, the school district's policies have to conform to those model policies, don't they?
Well, Vince, here, I'm going to tell you something in the audience that might surprise some people. A policy like this does not have any teeth because it is not law. And this is a scary thought when you have people thinking that we can just rubber stamp these policies. I'll tell you right now, I cannot give my rubber stamp of approval just because Governor Youngkin says parents matter and throws out a few freedom crumbs, right? And here's what I'm going to tell you. This is so important for people to understand. And I did the rush to judgment myself. I was a little bit guilty of this last month. I saw when the policies came out, I read through them quickly and thought, okay, hey, what's not to like about this, right? We're going to uphold First Amendment rights. We're going to make sure that the 14th Amendment is honored. We're going to make sure that parents have a say. They're the ones who should be directing the care, education, and upbringing of their children. But once I dove in further a few weeks ago with a little bit of help from Virginia for Children First, their website is VAF as in Frank, CF.org, and they hold elected officials accountable. People need to know that there are two very important things in this policy that they have to consider. Number one, school boards need to ask questions about what does it look like when parents are going to have to opt their children out of sharing a restroom with students who identify as transgender. Yes, that is written in the model policies. What is that going to look like? Are schools prepared to do that? Are they prepared to hand out opt-outs and make them available to parents?
Okay.
To my understanding at this point, we're not there. Number two, here's another scary thing. Back in September 2022, when this first came out, if you recall, before it went through all the public comment, the month-long public comment period, this model policy cited a very important case, Troxel v. Granville, which said it was upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court and said that parents' right to raise their children are perhaps the oldest of the fundamental liberty interests recognized by the court.
Yes.
Now, in July of 2023, when the revised policies came out, what does it say under that section? It references Code of Virginia 22.1-2721B, prohibiting parental contact where a student is at imminent risk of suicide related to parental abuse or neglect. That is something that should scare every single parent, because we see what's happening right now all across the country with the notion that if you don't affirm a child, they're going to commit suicide. And if a child comes in and says, I'm suicidal because my parents aren't going to accept the position that I'm in, or they're not going to accept the fact that I identify as trans.
Right.
What is that going to mean? So my whole point in this is board members, parents, you cannot sit back and clap your hands just because these model policies came out. I mean, we're like in a situation here where we have been starved for so long.
Yes.
For good governance, right? Because of what we had to deal with under Governor Northam. It's giving a starving man a cracker and making him think that it's a steak. That's where we're at.
I see.
This policy has no teeth unless Governor Youngkin backs it up with an executive order at this point. I mean, and this is why school systems will say, well, we're just not going to adopt it. We're just going to buck it because we don't have to, because guess what? When former Attorney General Mark Herring, his assistant AG back in 2021 said there is no enforcement mechanism within the model policy statute. No punishment for a school board if they fail to pass inclusive policies as the model policy guides. So is the state going to come after school systems? Are they going to come after the school board's funding if they don't adopt it? No.
There's a lot of, you're saying a lot of important things here. And let me add one other thing to your concerns about the model policy as presented by the Youngkin administration. I said it when it came out, and I'll say it again now. The idea that obviously parents' rights are preeminent, but those rights don't include abusing your own children. So the state policy says that parents can decide whether or not their kid is a different gender. That doesn't make any sense. Abusing your child is not on the menu of things that a parent has to have in the school system. And so that is another, Mack truck size loophole in this transgender policy. But I want to focus on something you said a moment ago. You said that that the school districts can kind of do what they want here. They don't have to follow the policy. But the law specifically says, the language of the law specifically says that each school board shall adopt policies that are consistent with, but maybe more comprehensive than, the model policies. So that exists in the statute, Tiffany Polifko, meaning it is absolutely the law that they have to adopt the model policies. They can even expand upon them if they like. But what you're saying is there's no enforcement mechanism? There's no way to punish them if they fail to do it?
Well, individuals could punish them. So individuals could come forward and sue the school district. But what I'm telling you is that my understanding is that based on where we're at, there is no mechanism in the model policy statute to punish a school board if they fail to adopt those model policies. And that's why you saw a very small, you saw a small percentage of schools back in 2021 that chose not to adopt those policies. They did not adopt Governor Northam's policies, and they, lo and behold, didn't lose their funding.
You've also got the state sports body that's in charge of running all the sports leagues across the state. They're saying none of this applies to them, and they're going to let boys continue to play girls' sports wherever boys would like to do that, apparently.
Yes, that's correct. And what concerns me as well here in this situation is that my understanding is that as a school board, we cannot supersede VHSL. So we cannot say, even if as the school board makes this decision to either approve or reject these model policies, we cannot supersede VHSL and say, well, we simply just will not allow boys and girls to compete on the same sports teams, because VHSL has already dug their heels in. They drew their line in the sand and they said, we're not doing that. We're just going to let things continue as they have been.
So we put out a request to have Governor Youngkin on to talk about this, and obviously that hasn't happened yet. I hope to hear from him soon. Have you heard from him at all, Tiffany Polifko? I don't mean just you personally, but I don't see anything from Governor Youngkin on what he's going to do about all of these school districts in open revolt.
Well, listen, you know what, Vince? He's been on Fox News. He's gone on news channels and expressed his displeasure with Fairfax County not adopting the model policies. There's been a letter that's been sent out by Dr. Coons, the superintendent of public instruction here in Virginia. And in that letter that she sent out, the memo that she sent out is the same memo that essentially that James Lane put out, who was the former superintendent of public instruction back in 2021. Same thing. You must adopt these policies. You have to adopt these policies. But what people are not realizing is that there will be no consequences for not doing so unless the governor backs it up. He's the only one at this point that can do that, and he could do that by an executive order.
Which would do what? It would strip funding. What would the executive order do?
Well, it would give the policy teeth. So right now the policy really has no teeth. It really, like I said, if the school systems choose not to adopt it,
yes,
they're not going to lose their funding. individuals could come forward and sue the school system. But how did that work out in 2021? I mean, we saw what happened in 2021. Here's the thing: all the school systems that wanted to adopt it, we have to do it because that's what the governor said. That was their rationale. Well,
right.
That's what the governor said. This was Governor Northam's direction. I
remember.
So this is what we have to do, right?
Yes.
And now we're seeing the exact opposite for people who don't favor Governor Youngkin's politics. But I'm not playing the political game here. I'm playing the fundamental right game, which is not a game, right? These are fundamental rights. Parental rights are so fundamental, they cannot be given or taken away. And if anyone thinks that Governor Youngkin's model policies are going to give them their rights back, they are sorely mistaken. Governor Youngkin cannot give parents their rights.
No, that's for sure. That's for sure. But he can protect them, and he should rise.
He can protect them, and I certainly hope that he will do that. I certainly hope that he will do that because that is one of the primary things he was elected to do, and elected officials need to be held accountable.
No question. Tiffany Polifko, is there anybody else on the Loudoun County School Board who sounds or thinks like you do?
So, sometimes I get a little bit of help up there on the dais. Sometimes, a lot of times I'm just by myself, and that's okay because when I vote, I vote on principle, and I don't mind being alone. I'm fine eating at the table by myself.
Amen. Well, you're an inspiration. Thank you, Tiffany Polifko, Loudoun County School Board. Really appreciate your time today and your assessment of what's going on in the Commonwealth. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on, Vince.
Good to chat with you, as always. 3:50 now. Okay, just by happenstance, as we were chatting with Tiffany Polifko, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin did an interview with the Fox News Channel at the same time. And I'm told that, Corey, correct me if I'm wrong here, that he said that these counties, places like Arlington, Prince William, Fairfax County, what appears to be Loudoun County next, who are all in open defiance of the new transgender policy under the Youngkin administration, which says that you have to engage in life based on the sex you were born as inside the school system, unless your parents okay you transing. That's a crazy loophole. That policy, if they don't follow it, these schools, then they're breaking the law, he says. He said they will follow the law, right? They were speaking in some, imperative. You will follow the law, or what? What are the consequences of failing to follow the law? If the school systems decide to abuse these children, to have boys play girls' sports, to have boys in the girls' locker room, to have boys in the girls' bathrooms, to have boys taking girls' positions on all sorts of things. If the schools do that, allow a child, convince a child, in fact, not just allow a child, but convince a child that their body's a mistake, that their name is a mistake, the name that their parents gave them is a mistake, that there's something to be ashamed about the sex that they were born as. If a school starts conducting that kind of abuse, what are the consequences? What is going to happen? Tiffany Polifko wants to know. I want to know. That didn't come up on the Fox interview, as far as I'm aware. No conversation about consequences here. Youngkin just said they will follow the law. They have to follow the law. Or what? What's the answer to that question? We're going to keep asking it until we get one, because it seems kind of important, doesn't it? Hey, coming up just a couple minutes from now, I have other questions, too, about something big, which is the Biden administration's disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. All of those lives lost, all of those brave Americans killed during that chaotic disaster of a withdrawal from that country. The authors of a new book on the subject, who really dove in and have some new answers for us, Jerry Dunleavy and James Hassan. They'll be with us in studio coming up just minutes away.